With Amy Collier, I believe. Is that the correct way to pronounce your last name?
That's correct.
And we're going to be talking about the digital detox. I am Andrew here with Middlebury College Social Media. We're also joined by a guest, Greg Pask, who is also very, very active in digital communities. So very nice. Greg, you'll have to sit back and hold your tongue. Of course, use the chat features of all the platforms that we've got. We'll get your questions in there as we can. Amy, thank you for taking some time at what is a very busy time of the semester to talk about the digital detox. I want to describe what my understanding of it first is, then we'll find a little bit more about you. It's a way, it's not so much as giving up digital tools, it's finding a way to find more balance and maybe a digital diet to change how you're interacting with these tools that are part of our everyday lives. And you work with DLink. Could you describe what DLink is, your mission there, and what digital detox is all about from your point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So, DLink stands for the Office of Digital Learning and Inquiry. So, it's an organization that supports all kinds of digital explorations at Middlebury and the intersections of digital technologies with pedagogies at Middlebury across the institution. And so that group is both kind of supporting faculty exploration and student exploration of technologies and the ways those things might support their research and their pedagogy. But we're also a little critical of digital technologies as well. We are not techno evangelists. We like to say that we approach technology from criticality and hope. So we hope that there are transformative potential opportunities for digital technologies in our pedagogies. And we are also very critical of the issues that digital technologies bring about, like issues of privacy and surveillance, issues of harassment and bullying and mental health issues. So we try to bring those lenses to the work that we do in a way that both shapes how we work in this space and also shapes the ways we interact ourselves with technology. And so the digital detox came about right as we were coming together as a group. So D-Link is about 5 years old, right at 5 years old. I like to say we're just past our toddler years, right? We're just getting our feet really under us, maybe going to kindergarten now. Um, and right out of the gate, as we started to decide what kind of organization we wanted to be, we knew that criticality was going to be really important to our work, that we wanted to make sure to ask hard questions about technology and not just assume that it's an inherent good. And so one of our instructional designers at the time suggested that we be inspired by some of the digital detoxes and data detoxes that are out in the world. Tactical Tech has a wonderful data detox and a gorgeous website to accompany it. So we were really inspired by that, and we decided to come out of the gate, right? And we had just formed as an organization. We came right out of the gate and put forward our first digital detox. It's really not about taking a break from technology or even a diet from technology, but more about giving ourselves a chance to reflect on some issues that technology brings into our lives and encouraging folks who are participating in the detox to bring those reflections into their own practice as well. So the first year we ran it, we had, kind of a variety of articles, everything from how to maybe make email suck less in your life to privacy, to misinformation and dealing with that. So we kind of had a range of things. The years after that, we've really tried to have a theme. And so the second year, we focused on digital equity and inclusion. The third year, we focused on attention and the ways in which digital technologies and our attention are very linked together, and how digital technologies really profit off our attention. Last year, because of the pandemic, we did a focus on digital inclusion and equity again, but really focus on the perspective of how things have changed related to the pandemic. So when we had to make a transition to remote education because of the pandemic, lots of schools across higher education started using remote proctoring tools, which we have some real concerns about in terms of surveillance and students' data privacy. So we wrote about those kinds of things in light of the pandemic. So this year, fifth year, we have been really inspired by some of our instructional designers have been interested in the intersections between kind of environmental work and technology, both the ways in which technology can support environmental action and the ways in which technology is a contributor to environmental problems. So things like the impact of data centers, the environmental impact of data centers. So that's the theme for this year is the intersections of the environment and the digital.
So many things that I want to ask you about. The first is this was the last thought I had, was you talked about the environmental impact of digital technologies. That makes me think of um, Bitcoin and those blockchain currencies and the huge amount of computer resources that are needed, the electricity that's being pulled into there. Do enough people know about that and recognize what goes on behind these cloud computing systems that we rely on that brings you your Netflix and the environmental impact of those places, do you think?
We're definitely seeing more coverage in the media of it. I've opened several articles in the last few weeks about it, but I think day to day we don't necessarily have the tools and strategies in place to reflect on those questions related to our daily use of technology. So, for instance, what is the carbon footprint of a Zoom meeting? My God, I had 9 Zoom meetings yesterday, so I don't know. I didn't really have a chance to think about it, but it feels like those are the kinds of questions we want to help people think about is what is the kind of environmental impact of what I'm doing in this digital space? And then more broadly, yes, industries and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and things like that, we should be thinking and asking about those questions. And I don't know that we are kind of in our day-to-day lives really asking those questions. I'll give you a little fun little fact, which is one of our articles for the Digital Detox is going to be about how to think about the carbon footprint and the design of a website. And as part of writing this, Tom Woodward, who's our director of learning spaces and technologies, has actually designed our Digital Detox website for this detox to be as kind of carbon friendly as possible. So he's really gone through the process of understanding, okay, how much is the carbon footprint of an image? How do you think about speed and file size and how that impacts the carbon footprint of the website? So when you go to our Digital Detox website for this detox, at the very bottom, there's a little bit of information about the speed and file size of the website and a little question mark that you can click and it'll take you to a page that actually analyzes the carbon footprint of that website.
That
He's going to write about the process of doing that.
that's amazing. I am going. That's a whole thing in itself. You mentioned. I want to really quickly ask about the online proctoring tools, which I remember was such a source of controversy as everybody went online. So my understanding of these proctoring tools is the software accesses the camera in your computer and it watches where you're looking. It really is how much time you're looking, where your eyes are going like that. That does seem pretty invasive. Where is the line between helpful and spying?
Wow. Okay. Let me come back to pedagogy. Okay, so I'm going
Okay.
to start at the kind of technical side of things, and I won't go too far into that, but just let me start there. But I want to end back at pedagogy, so don't let me forget that. Um, you're right. So online proctoring technologies vary in how they approach proctoring students. You're right that some of the technologies use the system itself and AI to try to analyze whether a student is cheating by things like their eye movements, what's around them, their body movements, and things like that. There are lots of problems with that. Say, neurodivergent students might have different eye movements than what's been kind of deemed as normal and could be flagged as cheating when they're not. There's also been real issues with students of color not registering in those systems without certain kinds of lighting patterns in their rooms, which again, huge problem. So there's some major kind of issues around equity that show up with these AI-based remote proctoring tools. The other element is, so there's kind of a version of these technologies, which is there's a person who is, you have to kind of connect with and they watch you take your exam. That's another version of this. And here we run into just as many issues, right? There's a lot of, for some students that's a traumatic experience. All of these tools I think bring a lot of trauma to students in terms of their test taking experience. It's already hard enough to take a test, right? Imagine then having somebody watch you or being worried about whether or not if you turn in your chair, you're going to get flagged as cheating, right? So there's a trauma issue there, but there are things like, a lot of the folks who do this proctoring are gig workers. And we've seen examples of situations where they have not acted appropriately with students and are not held accountable because they're not actually employees of a corporation, right? So there's some real problems with that model as well. So all in all, I have real big concerns about not only the ways in which remote proctoring kind of inserts into the testing process a real mistrust, a real treating of students through carceral approaches. Um, I also have concerns about just the data that it ends up collecting about students, and the ways in which that introduces all kinds of long-term issues and harms, whether that's the ways in which folks of color, trans students are treated by these technologies and the way their data don't match up to what's considered normal, and whether that's the long-term access to student data that these technologies have that they can share more broadly. So I have a lot of concerns. What I would say is, to your question, which I would find really hard to answer about the line between, I don't even remember exactly the words you
Helpful
used,
and
but
spying.
surveillance,
Yeah.
helpful and spying. I think when we start talking about how we assess students and how we ask students to show us that they've learned, there's a range of possibilities that we can employ that are founded in research about pedagogy that says, here are ways that we can understand how students learn without introducing a need to surveil them to make sure that we can trust that, right? And I think those are the conversations I want to have. I want to have with our faculty and with faculty across higher education. What are the ways we can really understand how students are learning in ways that don't require us to surveil them? I think that's where we have some really fruitful opportunities.
Thing that makes me think about is, and this was reflected in our work just today, the quick shift over to remote learning. And in March of 2020, every teacher everywhere throughout higher education, K-12, suddenly found themselves faced with all these online tools that maybe they mistrusted before, didn't think was good teaching. What have you encountered in your work from a teacher who has suddenly found themselves needing to avail themselves of this technology where before they might have dismissed it? Is there a learning curve? Are there assumptions that they're making that aren't true? And have you seen them come around to some of these tools that you have confidence in?
Well, Greg was right. He asked really good questions. So there's a lot to answer there. Um, when we made the transition to remote last year, and at various points throughout these last 2 years, where we've needed to adjust things because of the pandemic situation, faculty have been at various points related to technology. Some folks are very comfortable with it, whether they use it personally, and so they're able to kind of translate that into using it professionally. Or whether they've never used it and this is brand new to them. We've been able to work really closely with faculty to help them kind of think through, the driving questions being, what am I trying to do, right? What's important about my pedagogy? What do I want students to learn and how do I help students get there? So we work with faculty to try to get to the activities, the strategies they use to help students learn in the ways that they want students to learn. And so sometimes that requires, starting at really basics. How do you use this technology, right? We have a kind of a standard suite of technologies here at Middlebury that folks can use. How do you use them? Everything from clicking buttons, right, to then thinking about how do you design interactions and activities in those platforms to do what you hope to do. We try very hard to never separate those two things, right? That the pedagogy and the clicking of buttons are actually very intertwined. And which buttons you click is actually very much driven by what you're trying to do pedagogically. And so we try to really start the conversations at the pedagogy, and go from there. And what that means, I think, is that at times faculty have come back to us after having had exposure to a way in which a technology served a particular pedagogical purpose, maybe really well for them. They've come back and said, okay, now I might be teaching in person this fall, but actually I want to keep thinking about the way I might use this technology going forward because it added something to my class that I valued. My students maybe were able to um, publish their work in a public way and got feedback from experts around the world, right? Maybe that was something that they introduced as part of this that felt really right. My students were able to do some closer reading on their texts because I introduced annotation, digital annotation, and social annotation in my class. So there are some ways in which some faculty have really started to think about what could be taken forward from that transition that would be beneficial long term for their students and their classes. And that's been really exciting to see. And again, those are the conversations. The pandemic continues to throw a lot of curveballs at us. So I'd like to think that at some point we'll just get to the point where we can say, okay, that was behind us. Now what? Really, I think what we're going to continue to be dealing with in higher education is lots of disruptions, whether it's pandemic related, whether it's climate related. We're going to have to be ready for lots of transitions and disruptions. And so technology, I think, affords us some tools to help, but really, I think the pedagogy has to be so interwoven into those conversations.
It feels sometimes like the pandemic over the past years has accelerated some of this learning and embracing this technology. Like we'd had to jump 5, 10 years ahead in a year. Have you felt that yourself?
I muted myself, by the way, because the cat and the dog are having a little moment right now. So pardon me if you hear some, that's what's happening. Um, Speaking of acceleration, no, yes and no. I mean, I think what it's done is it's maybe made many folks who weren't using technology a little bit more comfortable with the idea that technology might play a role in what they're doing. I would, you know, a lot of the technologies that we use or recommend using are not necessarily new technologies, right? Zoom's been around for a very long time. Um, I shouldn't say very long time. That's probably a really relative thing to say, but it's been around for many years before it really kind of accelerated its use in the pandemic. So I wouldn't say that many of these things are new so much as the role they play in our institutions might be emerging, and leading to some interesting changes in how we think about things like community building, right? Like we weren't doing Discord and Twitch a few years ago, right? And now it's seen as a potential place where conversation and community at Middlebury can happen. And so that's a new way of thinking about some technologies that have been around for a while, right? And I think that's probably how I would characterize the acceleration of change.
There's so much to talk about, and it's really great to hang out with you and chat about all the work that you do. It's so impressive at DLink. There's instructional design. There's all sorts of resources for how to use all this stuff. So please, anybody watching, please explore the DLink site. And you've touched on something that I know Greg is also passionate about. Our guest here in the studio is ungrading, and how do you judge student success without putting a letter on it, and how all those things work together. And so I know there's lots of faculty members and people thinking about that. But we're here to talk about the 2022 Digital Detox. So, my understanding is you sign up, you get a couple of newsletters a week. There's all of these things. What are some of the other things that people could expect to see in their inboxes once they register?
Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm so excited to tell you this. So, yes, you're exactly right. Um, there are, starting January 5th, so if you sign up for the detox, starting January 5th, you will receive 2 newsletters per week, each focused on a different topic. And these newsletters tend to be, a few paragraphs of text focused on a topic related to our theme. So, for instance, the first one coming out of the gate is going to be me writing about what powers the web. And I'm going to be both connecting the threads of the kind of physical power behind the web, but also our attention, which is a lot of what powers the web from the perspective of monetization and why these web technologies exist in the first place. So we're going to start with that, but across the next weeks and through February 4th, we'll have different topics twice a week. You'll hear from a lot of folks in DLink. So one of the really cool things about this detox is that a lot of folks in our group contribute. So it's not just me. There's some of our instructional designers, some of our directors. In the past, at times we even had some of our student interns write some. So it's been, we try to get a multitude of voices in the mix. So here's two fun new things for this digital detox this year. One, we have two guest posts. So they will be kind of collaboratively created guest posts with us. We've done this in the past, so it's not totally new, but we'll call it new so that people are really excited about it. So we're going to have Giuliano Khalil, who is at the Center for the Blue Economy at the Middlebury Institute. He's going to be talking with Bob Cole, who's one of our directors, about some of the work that they're doing in the Center for Blue Economy and the connection of the ways in which their work is focused on using digital technologies and storytelling to help communities really understand the impact of climate change on their communities and to try to think of how to address those impacts. So Giuliano will be talking with Bob, and they're going to write together that article, which will be coming out at the end of January. And then similarly, Jack Byrne and Michelle McCauley from the college, from the Franklin Environmental Center, are going to be sharing kind of some dispatches from Energy 2028. So they're going to be talking about some ways in which technology intersects with the work of Energy 2028 at the college, and some projects that kind of highlight those intersections. And so they're going to be writing a post for us early February. Now, here's the other super cool thing that's tied to that. In the last couple of years, as we've grown the outreach of the digital detox to more people, lots of folks have been asking us for live sessions with the chance to kind of talk about some of these issues. So this year, we are going to be offering a couple of live sessions. Hopefully, we don't have it all kind of scheduled out yet, but hopefully immediately following, so like the week following a guest post, we're going to have a live session with those guests. So the week after Giuliano Khalil's post, we're going to have a live session with him to talk about his work, and we're going to maybe try to collect questions ahead of time so folks can really feel like they're being heard, and there will be a chance to interact with Giuliano and one of the D-Link folks. And then the week after Jack and Michelle do their post, we're going to try to have a live session that they're involved in as well to talk about what they wrote about and to dive deeper. They raised, for instance, some really interesting questions that the Energy 2028 projects and the technologies bring up, like how do you deal with the trade-offs that you have to make when you're doing these kinds of projects on a campus? And there's some really interesting conversations to have there. So we're going to try to have those live in January, February.
So you can register ahead of time. You get the things in your inbox, all these sort of value-added things to go along with it. And you can also visit the Digital Detox site and see past years' newsletters, catch up on some of those amazing things that you were talking about. There is a question
Mhm.
from our audience member here, which I will
Oh,
forward on to you. Greg asks, regarding the surveillance aspects of teaching and assessments, how do you feel about some of the more hidden surveillance features, at least that students can't see, checking in to see how long students engage in a video or a reading assignment on Canvas?
yeah. I this is one of the reasons why our group really takes a critical lens, is that we are very concerned about the ways in which technologies we use daily in higher education institutions and often don't question, um, the ways in which those technologies have surveillance features built in. And in the case of Canvas, for example, not only are these technologies more widely used than some others, right? Lots of folks use Canvas across both Middlebury and higher education more broadly. But a lot of times the protections of student data that are built into, say, a privacy policy for an educational technology tool might change if that technology tool is, say, acquired by another entity, which recently happened to Canvas. So these are exactly the kinds of concerns that we have and we think a lot about. And one thing that these concerns, and we aren't the only ones who have it, right? Faculty have these concerns. Other folks in other groups like the library have lots of concerns about privacy implications of these technologies. So we convene a privacy group that talks about these issues, that tries to, one, understand the ways we might better protect our own students from these issues, but also tries to educate folks on campus about privacy as well. So um, I have big concerns, Greg, and it's definitely something that we think a lot about and try to do work on. One other thing that we do related to this is we run what are called crypto parties. And don't let the term crypto here make you think of cryptocurrencies. Crypto here means is related to cryptography, and it's around helping people to. So these crypto parties. They're not an idea we created. They are kind of a global initiative that we brought to Middlebury. And these are hands-on events focused on helping folks develop some strategies for better protecting their data and their privacy. And last year, or maybe it's the year before last, time means nothing. Recently, in the last few years, we ran a crypto party called Zoom Against the Machine. And it was run by a student. So part of what we try to do here is partner with students to help them drive these conversations. Um, and this student really helped run a session where they were reflecting with other students about the ways in which Zoom issues around privacy show up in Zoom, issues around harassment and Zoom bombing show up. And so the idea of these is to really give students and faculty a chance to think about those things and then also take actionable steps to improve the situation.
One last question, although we could talk all day. My last one is, there's so much ageism around technology. Oh, that's a young people's thing. Only young people know how to make that work. Do you agree with that?
No, no, not at all. The narrative of digital natives, I think, is so false. It has the ways in which um, technology is not evenly distributed, and the ways in which access to technology and access to um, helpful information about how to be safe and effective using digital technologies, that's not evenly distributed. And it's not because of age, it's because of things like class and socioeconomic status and things like that. There are lots of issues of equity that show up that have nothing to do with age. And so my perspective is, rather than talking about age when we talk about the uneven distribution of skills and access, we should talk about other issues that show up in that space. Um, so,
And you've done that with past digital detoxes and probably into the future. And this year, it's how you run your computer all day long. What is your carbon footprint for your home office? Think about all that sort of stuff. Amy, thank you so much for taking some time today to spend with me. Greg, thank you for joining us. I'm going to stop the Twitch stream, but we'll just finish off on Discord and then we'll say a quick goodbye. So thank you all for joining us.